What's going on, guys, and welcome back. We still got like 3.5, 4 weeks of the format before Arcasia's Island releases, so that means we still got a little bit to go. We got weeks to play. We want to see what decks moving forward are going to be the best because, well, there is a link down below to a spreadsheet where you can track the 3 current tabs and see how some things go up and down. Usually the top deck or two stay stagnant where they're at, but then there's some movement in that tier 2 rogue range to see what decks are playable. We're going to be going into our 4th and final tab. Again, that link is down below because set championships are over. So moving out of set championship format into the rest of set 6 format before set 7 drops. And man, set 7 is going to be wild. These reveals are insane. We're going to start doing some deck profiles too as the reveals finish up, and then at the end of those videos I'll show you guys the deck now, I'll talk about how it performs, and then it'll transition into what I expect the deck to be moving forward. So make sure you drop that like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. 5,500 subscriber giveaway, by the way, still is live, where we're giving away a case of Arcasia's Island. So make sure you get in on that, hit the subscribe button, more details to follow. Also, our Discord will be coming public probably by the time the next video comes up, not this one, sorry. And just making some changes and working things around so we can build the community outside of YouTube and interact and all that good stuff. But it's been a long time coming. It's overdue. It's time. Today, though, we're going to talk about the decks moving forward. Which decks should see the success? Which decks should you plan for? What decks are just overall the best decks? The first one we're going to talk about, regardless of my personal feelings on the deck and not being a huge fan of it, Amber Steel, Diggy Diggy Hole, with or without that location. This deck is very good. It has proven time and time again that it is in fact a tier 1 threat. Repeat, Amethyst Steel. This is more of the mid game version, less on the aggressive. I think that it's, once again, putting my bias aside, I'm going to drop it lower than I would like to. I'm going to put it in high rogue. I think it's still a very strong deck. It's just not really seeing a ton of success, nor is it seeing a ton of play. The more aggressive versions of this deck are far more popular. Steel Fossa. This was a deck that I highlighted and talked about a couple weeks ago during set championships. I think this deck is still absolutely insane. It's got a very good toolbox. It can go quick to go under those control decks, and it can absolutely pummel those aggressive style decks. I think Steel Fossa is a very fun and very strong deck in the format. Blue Steel Aggro. This deck has Harlan Sweet popularized it, and he's done very well with it as of recently. It's moving on up. It is officially in the tier 2. Again, you can click the link down below to see how we calculate that. But moving forward, I expect it to stay there as well. I think that it's just another really solid way to play aggressive strategies. I'm curious to see with the game moving into the next set how it will, I guess, work out, because we have a lot of very quick, very aggressive decks that are currently good in the game, and it's going to be neat to see how we do moving forward. Another Amethyst Steel. This one is the more aggressive version. I'm going to actually put it ahead of Steel Fossa in tier 2. Unlike the mid-game version, this one sees more play. It sees more success, and they're actually pretty similar. It's mostly those first couple turns, the different play lines, but the middle games like turns 3, 4, 5 are often very similar. The play style does slightly differ. You might try to push a little harder on this version, obviously being more aggressive, whereas the other one you can afford to play it off a little bit slower and be a little more resource conscientious. Moving forward, we got lots of common ones in a row. Ruby Fossa. You know, the disrespect might be there, but I'm going to put Ruby Fossa down in rogue. I think Steel Fossa is the better Fossa deck. It's still a very good deck. Don't get me wrong. Like, decks in tier 2, decks in rogue, especially at your local levels, absolutely can just come in and destroy, especially with a good pilot. Like, I have a local pilot who's very, very fluent and good with his Ruby Fossa. One, I think, did he take first at 2 set championships, or first and second plus a couple other cards. Does really well with the deck, and some of that is just on the pilot and the deck being a solid deck, but I think it just is noticeably behind some of these other strategies. Green Steel discard's been seeing more play. We started to see it go back to the roots of set 5 as far as its build. So whether you're playing the set 5 build or you're playing the updated build that Zan Saeed played at the Continentals, either way, I think this deck is proving that it's coming back, and it is still, once again, a very strong deck. So I'm going to put it near the top of Tier 2. Blue Steel Control. I actually like this deck still more than the aggressive version. We just saw Jonathan, or is it Jonathan and Joseph? I feel so bad now. Lamb. Jonathan? I think it's Jonathan. Anyway, Mr. Lamb do very, very well at Continentals, and then he was just at the 10K as well and did really good with the deck once again. So we're seeing this deck evolve and just stick around, and I've been saying it for most of the format that I felt like this deck was just underperforming and that the tools are still there for it. The clear-cut, undeniable, best undisputed deck of the format, Popsicle. There's really nothing else to talk about. Popsicle is just clear-cut the best deck in the format right now. Amber Sapphire, Hero Aggro. I'm going to put it down in Rogue. It can be a really fun, sneaky deck. And if your opponent doesn't actually read your cards, things like 2-drop Ana, your bigger Ana, your Auroras, your Alices, so many cards in this deck just have abilities on them that if your opponent doesn't read them, they might not think they're as threatening as they are. And then, holy cow, you just snuck up and won. Hero Aggro is just a really fun deck to play. We then have Blurple. Where do I want to put Blurple? Well, bias wants me to go throw them all the way up here, but reality has it they're probably near the top of Tier 2 still. They got super hyped up, started doing really well, and then it's been rough lately. The deck has not been performing as good this last week and a half or so. And part of that, I think, is just the way the format has shifted a little bit. But at the end of the day, I still think that Blurple's an incredibly strong deck, and it just needs a little bit of tweaking to stay right there at the top of Tier 2. Jafar's New World. I got my one of my Scar promos with this deck. I think it's still really fun. I'm actually going to put it at the top of Rogue. If I had more faith that people would play it, I would actually put it in Tier 2. I think the deck is sneaky good. I just don't think it's going to have that player base to put it any higher than a Rogue strategy. Lemon Lime discard. Amber Emerald finally saw some success. It actually got a top for the first time in like over a month. And I still think it's an okay deck. It kind of like the Green Steel version went back to its roots of set 5 and to get that top. I'm going to leave it here though. I'm going to put it in Rogue until it starts to do a little bit more. I need to see more from it before I warrant putting it any higher. Despite recent struggles, Ruby Amethyst is still a Tier 1 deck. It's going to take a lot for me to remove this deck from Tier 1. The toolbox, the consistency, just the overall powerful nature of this deck. Like I said, it's going to take a lot for me to have to remove them from Tier 1. Amber Amethyst Hyper Aggro. They're going to come down here in our Rogue strategy. Once was the clear-cut best aggro deck that we had. Now it's possibly not even in the top 5. And that's kind of crazy to think about, just the way the game has shifted and went. This deck it got left behind with the newest set, and the way everything's been going, I don't think that's going to change moving into set 7 either. Amethyst Emerald Tempo. Where do I want to put Tempo? I'm going to put it, do I put it ahead or behind Blurple? I think Blurple and Tempo are probably the two best Tier 2 decks. You could probably interchange them either which way. It's kind of like Ruby Amethyst with less high-end ceiling, a little bit better early game presence, but it's just a super toolboxy, consistent deck, a lot like Ruby Amethyst is. But a lot of time that high-end impact from the Ruby cards is what pushes Ruby Amethyst to be the better of the two. But don't sleep on Amethyst Emerald. I think it's still an incredibly strong deck. Baja Blast. So I was super critical of this deck, and I think it ended up being warranted because tracking the tops, the deck just did not perform anywhere near what everyone made it sound like. I'm actually going to put it down here, all the way down in Rogue. And maybe people disagree with that, but I don't know. There was just something about it. It hasn't really performed incredibly well. Not that it's performing bad. It just has not performed like incredibly well to warrant shoving it way up high on the list. It seems very dependent on a couple key things, and it's not very fluid where if it's not working, you're going to struggle a ton. It's kind of like Bucky discard, where unless you're an incredibly smart pilot, if you don't get the Bucky to stick right away, you're going to be trying to play a deck in a way that it's not really designed to. And it doesn't mean you can't. Muses is a big card for this one, where it's like that Bucky conundrum where if you hit it and you hit your cards, you're probably winning the game. But if you miss it, you're probably losing the game. And like I said, a good pilot plays around that and can do it. But just overall, the majority of the player base, I don't see this deck being that huge threat. I called it out immediately when I first saw it. I said, I think it's hype. I think it was unknown, and I don't see it being great moving forward. And, well, in the last 2.5 weeks or whatever it's been since it was first kind of revealed, it hasn't really performed that well. So it's one of those times where I can say I think that I was right. It's still a good deck with an incredibly high ceiling, but overall it's just fallen kind of flat. The last deck we have to mention is Steel Song. It's actually starting to see a resurgence. It had a really strong week to finish out Set Championship week. Also with those big events that were going on outside of Set Championships. Steel Song, I'm going to put it all the way up as the third best deck moving forward. It's got very aggressive early play lines to help compete against Popsicle. You know, maxing out on daisies, Smees, playing a few piglets as well. And Lilo's another card you could potentially toss in there. Being able to tutor out and get to your Zeuses and play them with your Singers earlier. Such a good song, dealing with like half sharks so cleanly, genies, all kinds of problem cards. This deck just answers so many things, and I would almost say Steel Song maybe, just maybe, moves into that second best deck spot moving forward for the rest of this format. We'll see what happens. There's some cards coming in the next set that really put the hold on Steel Song, so we'll see how it finishes out. Again, we got a lot of new content coming for you guys. We'll have a whole format breakdown as well coming up in a couple weeks here. All kinds of good stuff. Our 5,500 subscriber giveaway is just about there. Case of set 7, so make sure you're subscribed. Go ahead and do that. Thank you guys for watching and taking the time out of your day to come hang out. What do you think is right? What's wrong? What's too high? What's too low? What deck do you plan to play? And thanks for watching.